primarily because of the lighting, the decorative street lights, and even more so the fact that all the utilities were run from the backs of the properties. There were never any electrical lines, or hook or telephone poles or whatever on the fronts of those houses. And you don't realize also, when the first development here built without sidewalks. Lots many years ago were very expensive. Development was expensive because not only did you have the cost of putting utilities in, but sidewalks were required. We had a period of time a few years ago when Mr. Smack Montgomery decided the boulevard should be sidewalk. And that was a battle for a while. Smack couldn't understand why he had to shovel his sidewalk and other people would have to shovel theirs.
I agree, Joe.
And the Stewart family, who lived in the brick house in front of Armour's, that was originally the Stewart home, developed Stewart Avenue and Superior Street. They moved from the house on West Main Street next door to the old hospital. In fact, they sold the land to the hospital, and I have the original deed, which I'm presenting to the Historical Society. Stewart sold it to Pearsall's, Pearsall's sold it to First.
And First built my house.
Right. But anyway, I understood that Stewart's built the house on the corner of Stewart and Poplar. That may not be true. That's where they moved. It wasn't very old when they moved to it. And then later on, the pillars that are on that house were put on by Dr. Kelly. His way. Later developments where Walt Davis was a developer doing Ridgeway and Davie. Dave Shelley purchased what was called the Miller Farm and was responsible for developing Lower Garden Avenue, Lower Tidball. If you go down Tidball or Garden, either one, you go from two different age houses altogether. You get down to where Trick grew up on Tidball, is one of the first newer houses. And you go on down and they're all 50s, 60s, mostly 50s, late 40s. But he was responsible for that, Clark Street and Kettler Drive. And Dave Shelley ended up living on Kettler Drive. The first house on Kettler Drive was built by Ellis and George Kettler. As you go up Kettler, up onto the hill, first house to the left-hand side, Ellis and George built. And when he was drafted into the Army, she couldn't stay there with her kids by herself, so they sold the house and moved over next to Isaac Kettler's house on West Main Street until they ended up moving out to Hillcrest Circle. Okay, later development, McCandless. Rube McCandless had an insurance company here. Basically never sold real estate, but he did the development where Overhill and on East Pine Street. He lived originally on the corner of North Center and Chestnut, and then they built a one-story house on Pine, right past the boulevard, the left-hand side. One-story house, no basement, very low, very attractive house. Kip Harshaw. Basically his development on Shady Drive and Eastover was actually the last development in the borough of Grove City. So it's kind of significant that the connection from William Harshaw clear to Kip and the amount of real estate that they were responsible for. Kip's development had gotten even more expensive. And Kip told me when they sold the last lot, that's the first profit he saw from that development. That's how long it took. Basically speaking, the profit was the value of one lot. Just about what it was. And I mentioned the Hummel development because it's adjacent to Shady. Started by Ed Hummel, finished by Ethel. So it's the newest development. It's right next to Enterprise Road and the area. The builders, going clear back to the turn of the century, Johnny Floyd, and you'll see there Johnny Floyd's hell houses. Marion McConkey told me that these houses were referred to as hell houses because Johnny Floyd was very English, and when he said L, it sounded like hell. So Marion's house was built by John Floyd. The house I lived on the corner of West Main and Stewart Avenue, I know was built by John Floyd. It's a hell house, L-shaped porches is what they all had. And, excuse me, when I was doing remodeling in our house, I had to remove some baseboard. Written on the back of the baseboard was Craig Planing Wheel, which was belonged to Elpheus and Randall Craig and Johnny Floyd. Those two names were there, so there was no question in my mind. John Floyd built the house and he bought the lumber for it and the woodwork. Craig's was a planing mill. It wasn't just a place to buy lumber. It wasn't a lumber mill, so to speak. It was a planing mill. They also built furniture. I owned a table at one point in time that came from Mrs. Harshaw's house, and it's here somewhere. It was built by the Craigs. Lincoln Land Company. That was a combination of Harshaw's, E.J. Fithian, R.E. English, prominent people in town who got together to build these houses out in the boulevard. The boulevard was laid out originally, if you see any of the old lots, it was 50-foot lots, almost totally. There were a few large lots. In fact, my house on Bessemer had one of the larger lots that was in the original layout. But most of them were 50-foot lots. And the boulevard was developed to be a place for the average people of Grove City to live in the wooded area, in a beautiful environment, in a beautiful setting. And basically speaking, the majority of Grove City was made up with average people working at college, working at Cooper Bessemer, built these houses, and basically speaking, they're very small. I don't know whether any of you have been in any of them or not, but they're small houses. They're 1,000, 1,200 square feet, some less than that, maybe even 800 square feet. Aesthetically, very appealing. But Lincoln Land Company never made any money. Eventually, houses got sold, but it was not a profitable situation. Book Davis probably built as many houses in town as any other single builder. And they started in the 30s and clear through to the last house that Book Davis built, other than one on Spec, which is down on, I think, Ridgeway, down in that area, because they own some land down there. But the last one contracted for was for Dr. Preston out on East Pine Street Extension. That was the last house that they were contracting to build. They built Kip Harshaw's house. I could have listed them, I didn't take the time to think about it. But there were a lot of houses in this town. They also were in remodeling. And in fact, I'll tell you the story about my house, because Book Davis, in 1948, my house was the last house on the left-hand side of Bessemer Avenue. In 1948, a man by the name of Gravenhofer bought the house. The house was built in 1917 by a college professor. No one, and even Dr. Kettler, couldn't tell me where Mr. Myers got the money to build that house, because he wasn't paid any money at Cooper Bessemer, or at the college. But anyway, he built it in 1917. He sold it in 1930, people named Anderson, and in 1942, people named Bobo Bango Coal Company bought the house. They were just there for 6 years when they sold it to Mr. Gravenhofer. 1948, Mr. Gravenhofer spent $25,000 remodeling the house. 1948, you were buying houses for $6,000 and $8,000 and $10,000. So $25,000 in the lot, $6,000 in landscape. You know, that was unheard of. You know, that was unheard of. But that came from Book Davis. They did that house. And they also did spec housing, particularly down on Tidbar, in that area. Shago, a lot of the houses Shago built are up on off East Main Street, on Rainey and you know, Memorial, mostly Rainey. In fact, Edgar Shago lived on Rainey at one point in time, and his wife was living there. I think you bought their apartment, didn't you?
I can tell you lots of Shago stories.
What's that?
I can tell you lots of Shago stories. There.
I'm sure there's stories about everyone. And then the Montgomerys, the Montgomery Company, Stacy Montgomery's here with us tonight. And anyway, they built primarily the defense houses, aside from some very significant houses that Stacy's grandfather, C.B., built, and her great-grandfather built the stone house that's directly behind the Fithian house on the boulevard. And we'll see pictures of all those, you know, as we go through. The houses, I think we'll start now, so you have something to look at besides me, and go from house to house.
Do you want me to do it, or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, this is actually David Craig's house, who was the father of Alpheus and Randall. That was his house, sat on West Main Street, where Mrs. Harshaw's house was later built. In fact, it was built on the foundation of this house. I could tell that from being in the basement of the house. There was no question. This house is still standing on Craig Street in Grove City. It was moved from this location over to Craig Street. Don't know who lives there now. A family by the name of Gaylord Cook lived in the house for years and years. It had, until about, I'm going to say 10 years ago, it had the original tin roof. The roof was replaced 10 to 15 years ago, I suppose. Okay. That's the house that replaced it. This was built, the original house was built in 1912. The addition on the left was built added in 1930. The roof was actually, in the back of the house, was actually raised, and 2 additional bedrooms were added to the back of the house. Mrs. Harshaw, as I say, they built the house in 1912. I'm sorry, her father, Alpheus, built the house in 1912. In 1918, he died, and his wife was there, and so C.G. Harshaw Sr. and Dorothy Harshaw moved from their house on Lincoln Avenue over to live with her mother and lived there the rest of their lives. Much to C.G. Harshaw's disappointment, he liked the boulevard, so wanted to be back out there. Mrs. Harshaw, like many people, never drove, and she loved being here where she could walk downtown and grocery shop every day, which she did. Every day was something. Okay, this is the house, the other house that's built by C.G. Well, that one was built by Craig, but C.G. Harshaw built this house in 1912. That's where they lived until 1918. Kip was born when they lived here. The addition on the right of the house was added by Dr. Les and Jane McClimans in about 1967 or 68. That was a family room kitchen combination over there. This is what we would call a prairie house. It is definitely a Frank Lloyd Wright design type of house. I've always suspected that he actually might have been the architect on it, but could never trace that. And I think Mrs. Harshaw, that would have been known, although Frank Lloyd Wright at that time No big deal. He was an architect, that's all. Ed Fithian. All right, this is the Ed Fithian house. Sits next door. The one we just saw is to the right of this. It sits up on the hill. It was built in 1915. Had a serious fire shortly after, almost gutted it and was rebuilt. Ed Harshaw raised his family in this house. He was president of First National Bank, was his role. He was in the bank. C.G. Harshaw was in the insurance business and real estate. And actually, the Harshaw family, going back to William, had a general store where they started to sell insurance. They then worked into an insurance company. E.J. Fithian. Okay, this is one of the Pine Street was the place where people lived. It was a place to live at the turn of the century. You'll find that almost every executive at Cooper Bessemer lived on Pine Street. This was E.J. Fithian's house, built around 1895, and that era had a that actually at what would have been a barn on the back of the house is now a two-story garage, but originally that would have been the horse barn for the house. Okay, Stuart. As I said, we talked about this earlier, built by, not sure who, but shortly thereafter, the Stewarts sold their house over on Main Street and moved here and lived there basically until the Kellys bought the house, and I don't recall what year that was. But that's where Kellys lived when Paula was with the Modern Heirs, and her sister, I can't remember the sister's name, Aunt Rose, you remember the sister who died? One of them died. She was in school with my Aunt Lois, and Aunt Lois said when we started finding out about anorexia, my aunt said, I'll bet any amount of money that she died from anorexia. Because they were on the road, of course, always wanted to look their best. And so that's off the subject, but as I said, it's easy for me to do that. John Crothers, another L house, built by Johnny Floyd. John Crothers was one of the founders of Cooper Bessemer. And of course, when this was sold by Mary and Glenn Crothers. Mary and Glenn ended up moving into this house, and you'll see two more houses that Mary and Glenn lived in. But they lived here until about, I think it was 38, when they moved to William Harshaw's house on the corner of Bessemer and, what's the street? We're Cunningham Funeral Home. Anyway, that's where they moved. This is the house, the original house that William Harshaw built on that corner that became Cunningham Funeral Home. And that relates at this point in time to Holmes Crosby. Holmes Crosby was the architect of choice at this point in time in Grove City. He was from Franklin, Oil City, and he, go back, if you will, it's hard to believe they're the same houses. You know, this was a carport. At that time, it might have even been for horses because there was a barn in this property. It came to freestyle garage. Okay. I mean, there's almost no semblance. John McHugh, another 1912 house. The stones were all gathered, I believe they think on the Camel Farm. Isn't that supposedly It had a tile roof, which unfortunately the present owners decided to remove. That's, if you've got a slate roof or a tile roof, you need to call Joe Jenkins.
Yes.
Okay? He wrote the book on slate and tile roofs, particularly slate. Yeah, literally, he wrote the book. You don't replace them, except for there's a soft slate that occasionally has to be replaced because the nails rust and they start coming off. But at any rate, and while we're on this, you've seen the Harshaw House, built in 1912, on Main Street. You've seen Ed Harshaw's house, built in 1915. Now looking at this one in 1912. In 1968, these three houses sold in the same year from the original owners. I found that fascinating at the time. And in fact, I tried to get the newspaper to write an article about it, because I thought it was that interesting. The Harshaw house sold to, who can tell me who owned the Golden Dunks? They were from Erie, out on West Main Street. I thought, sure, someone would remember his name, or her name. Anyway, they bought Mrs. Harshaw's house on Main Street for $18,000. Ed Harshaw's house sold to Roger and Carol O'Kane at that time for $32,000. And Nancy Hunziker purchased the house on the Circle, this house, also the same year for $32,000. Interestingly, none of those people were from town. I mean, you would have thought that houses as significant as these would have been purchased from, you know, have someone in town waiting for them. But all three of those people were not in town. Okay. E.J. Fithian, Forest Drive.
This is just the artist rendering.
Oh, that's the artist rendering of the McKinnon House.
Oh.
Okay, this is the E.J. Fithian house. As I said, basically the only estate that Grove City ever had. It comes right down to it. Because it had acreage, it had this beautiful home, it had an attached garages, an indoor swimming pool. It was a showplace, without any question. Interesting point on E.J. Fithian and the aluminum industry here. He owned property clear down to Madison and across Madison. In fact, there are a couple of small houses down there that he had people who worked for him live in those houses, little square white frame houses. But he built the building that Wendell August moved into on Madison Avenue in order to get them to come here at that time. That's the most basic economic development in the county, certainly that I've ever heard of. Leila Fithian's house. Leila, will show you. This is what Leila's house looked like before Priscilla Perna got hold of it.
Yeah.
Move it over in front of the screen.
Okay.
Maybe hold
There,
it, okay,
there.
put it in the light,
Put it in the light, hold it up.
maybe where the white framing is on the edge.
Over on the edge.
It was a red brick house. Leila Fithian was E.J. Fithian's sister. That's how she happened to build. That was built in 1922. Excuse me. When Martha Fithian, Fred's wife who owned the house, the big house on the boulevard, when Martha, after Fred died, Martha decided, and I had just passed away, she decided that she didn't cry, and she wanted to be close to town where she could walk to the post office and walk to town. She moved here in 1950 when Edna Johnstone Kettler, at that time Edna Johnstone, Edna and George Johnstone, he had Johnstone Foundry, They bought that house for $33,000. 1950. Okay, who's next? Okay, J. Bud Crothers. Okay, this is unquestionably together with the Fithian house. This is unquestionably the finest single-family residence in Mercer County that I've been in. It is absolutely, the workmanship in it is unbelievable. It was built in 1928 by Bud Crothers, who was then 28 years old. I don't know who the architect was, never checked into it to see. I think you're right. But he hired a decorator from New York City to come in to do the decorating. The house originally had damask wall coverings on the living room. They were stretched on almost like tackless in the living room. When Alice and George moved into the house, and they were very uptight about doing that, it wasn't their idea, it had to be removed. It was in shreds by that time. But that would have been 1972, 73, somewhere in that area. There's walnut woodwork in the house. It's an extraordinary house. I had the privilege of working with Alice over the years in decorating the house. The last major job we did was about 10 years ago. She decided she was tired of messing with plugging on kitchen drawers and what have you. I tried to talk her out of remodeling the kitchen because it's a horrible job. And at that time, Alice was probably 90 years old. She decided, no, as long as it would help me, I'll do it. So that's the last project that I got to work on in that house. But it's magnificent. Bud Crothers only lived there from 1928 to 1934. He sold the house to Mike Pollock, tall, distinguished Cooper Bessemer salesperson. He sold it to Mike Pollock for $25,000. That's what Depression did.
Yeah.
1934 was the height. And he sold it then, moved to Florida, never came back. He and his wife, Nan. The story goes from my Aunt Ruth, the oldest in the family, who knew them, that the parties held in that house and Bud Crothers' Stutz Bearcat parked in the driveway of the house were legendary, as was his wife, Nan. Fred Fithian. Okay, this is the Fithian house, the Kettler house, and now
Nudie.
right. I suspected that you might be who you are. I have a wonderful picture of Fred Fithian that I've been trying to get my cousin Jill to bring me to see you. So you get on Jill. Jill did landscaping for you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, the windows in this house are very unusual. Now, these are replacement windows, but the original windows were the same. They are that large, only because Mrs. Fithian had lived in a house down on Pine Street that she considered too dark, and she wanted windows. She fought with the architect over those windows. But it paid off, because that's one of the nice features of the house, inside and out, either way. But it's a remarkable house. It's been well maintained. Not much more I can say about it. Just it's a beautiful place. C.B. Montgomery, West Washington Boulevard. Stacy's great-grandfather built this house. I didn't get a chance to take a picture of the house her grandfather built, but her grandfather, this is on the boulevard, right behind the what I still will call the Keller House, or the 50th house. You'll be dead and gone before we come.
Finally, the sidewalk now.
Okay. Anyway, CD Senior, Casey's grandfather, built a very, very nice white colonial on Forest Drive, directly behind his house. Well, actually, the driveway's to the right, you go down the driveway, and CB's house is to the right. It was built in 1940. A major addition, the size of a small house, was added to the house in 1950. It had a bar that was larger than the one at the country club. And it was well used. There was as much entertaining that went on in that house as went on at the country club. Okay, the Charles Burton House.
I don't believe we have one of the Charles Burton.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, okay, it's in the next mix, and I
It's
don't.
in, yeah, that's right, it's in, yeah. Okay. How did I miss this one? This is C.G. Harshaw's house, built in 1953 by Book Davis Company. Rambling, beautiful, beautiful big house. Ted Hines from Hines. From Fine Instrument, owns that house now, and Skip sold it for $225,000, I believe. So things did change here, considerably. That's another interesting anecdote about the boulevard, and that is that there is, and that should be shown again here as we go through, every conceivable style of architecture and every price range. The interesting thing is that the more expensive houses did not elevate the less expensive houses, but the less expensive houses did not decrease the value of the more expensive houses. And that's the only way that could work. It's the only way it could work. Because the aesthetics of the setting made all the difference in the world. You know, so you have a small house, you'll get what they might have gotten over in Tidwalla Garden. You know, and there weren't many large houses built anywhere other than out here. But anyway, that was 1953, and that house also, as Tripp will tell you, and Lin was the scene of many, many parties.
I was too young for them.
Damn. Okay. This is a collection of different houses now. This was built by P.W. Book for himself to live in about 1930. He and Mrs. Book lived there until they sold the house to a fellow named Perry Chambers. No, they sold the house first to Helen Bryant and her husband, Jim Bryant. Excuse me. Who was a brother of Alice Kettler. Anyway, they lived there until 1940 when they sold it to Bryant's. Bryant's then sold it to a fellow named Perry Chambers, who owned the Sports Star store in Grove City. And then Books built another house down on the corner of Poplar and Spring Street. All right, this house is significant. Number one, it's an absolutely beautiful house, and much larger than it looks in this picture. It doesn't show the house at all. It was built by Lou McKay Carriage Works, in 1922. His wife died, I think 2 years after she was a first, and had lived in the house down the street. But his wife died, and my mother told me that at that time she would have been, I think, 10 or 11 years old, and she wanted him not to get married to anyone else until she grew up, because she wanted to live in that house.
Where is that?
That's on East Main, or on West Main Street.
Is that John Ellis?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we sold that to John. He was living down on South Center Street. We sold that to John, whatever year, $40,000. This is the H.O. White House. It's across the street from and down. Would be across from the Stewart House. This was built in 1912. The interesting thing about this house, H.L. White was the registrar at Grove City College for years and years. That was a wedding gift to he and his wife by her family who lived in Mercer. And I should know the name of that family. I knew it at one time, but I can't remember it. They lived in a beautiful, big Victorian house as you go out of Mercer towards Sharon on the left-hand side. It's now painted a horrible blue-green color or whatever. But that was her family home. They were very wealthy, and that was their wedding gift to H.L. and his. That's the Stewart house. Yeah, these are getting crunched for some reason.
This is the order.
No, I mean just,
Oh,
that's.
the dimensions?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Sorry about that.
And this is awful. Just plain awful. This was a Johnny Floyd house as well. It was Mary McCarthy's house. We've got a better picture of this somewhere down the road.
It was real dark and I tried to lighten it, but I guess I opened
No,
it.
I don't even want to look at that.
Okay, sorry. All right.
I hope the person who owns it isn't here.
Chuck, that was the house that was moved across the bridge.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we'll get to a better picture of it. So that's a whole Craig Harshaw story of how that happened. This is the house on Pine Street where Craig Fithian lived. He was married before he married Martha, and had, I think, one son. Then they started having children, and that's when they put an addition on the house and decided to move out, build the house in 1930, out the Boulevard, 1928 actually, 29. And but you see the size of the windows. She didn't want little windows in her house. She wanted big windows, and she got them. Okay, this is the house I was telling you about last, a remodeling job that Hope Davis did. I lived there from my family, and I lived there from 1977 to 1998. We paid $64,000, bought the house from Don Van Voorhees. 7 people wanted first chance on it. I made a lot of enemies when I bought it, but it was Don Van Voorhees' choice. At any rate, the right side of the house was an open porch that actually had a fireplace in it. And other houses, the Ed Harshaw house, has an open porch. Well, it's closed now, but has a porch that had a fireplace in it. Anyway, that in 1948, that was enclosed, became a family room designed pretty much like a ship captain's quarters or a railroad car. Then the porch on the left was added, and the little vestibule on the front was added. There was just a stoop there. That's a mission-style house. It's Prairie and Mission, another Frank Lloyd Wright style. That was a mission style. Originally, it had beam ceilings throughout the house, dark woodwork, which was still there. But when Gravenhofer remodeled it, it was his money. He removed all the beams, and he put plate glass windows throughout the house. These got replaced. In fact, I think it's one of the few things that Scott did in the house, was replacing windows. They were big, ugly plate glass windows. Well, Davis again. This house was built in 1940 as a spec house. It's in the boulevard across from your house. Okay. What's interesting about it, number one, it was a spec house. Number two, it was for sale at that time for, I believe, $12,000, which was a lot of money at that time. Foster Resner from Resner Gas Company bought the house at that time. Okay. He lived there until he died. When he died, he was a doctor whose name I can't remember. He lived in the house. Can we go back?
Sorry.
Chuck,
Doctor lived there.
Chuck, I saw my first television show in the living room of that house,
with the residents.
Resner's
Is
house.
that right? Okay, that's interesting. But anyway, the doctor owned it, and when the doctor sold it, Betsy and Demi Kuchaluchis bought the house. During the time that Betsy and Demi were there, they had a very serious fire. The house had to be completely renovated, completely redone. And when they built their very contemporary house up on Enterprise Road, Bill Resner bought it back. Now, I'm skipping one person, important person who lived there. When Foster died, Joy Gallagher and Dan moved into the house. And they lived there until they built their house out on Cranberry Road. You know, then it was sold to the doctor, and then when Bill Resner and Ramona returned from California, they bought the house. It had just been redone by Betsy and David.
Chuck, you notice this house here don't have any overhang.
Yes.
Paul Book told me one time, I was kidding him in the later years, I was in here when I was a kid with my dad because my dad dug many a basement for Paul, horses. And I said to Paul one day, I said, are you trying to beat your competitors a little bit by keeping costs down, not putting any overhang? We go around other houses in Grove City, there might be 1.5 feet, 2 feet of overhang. He said we had coal furnaces, and if you people remember this back in the years, the smoke would stain up with the house with the overhang, and there's a dead space the air couldn't get to. For about 3 feet down, the houses would be black from the soot. He says, when you don't have an overhang, every time it rains, nature gives your house worked out.
If you ever questioned Paul Book about anything, there was always a reason why he did it the way he did it. And probably a good one. Okay, this is a Lincoln Land Company house. There are a number of them out there. As I said, the Grove City Development Company and Lincoln Land Company, one and the same, took bath on a lot of these houses, but they're nice, comfortable, and as I said, all very aesthetically pleasing. You know, every one of them. Some, they're all different, and some more interesting than others. This is another one. My cousin Jill's son lives there now. Delightful house. Jane Harshaw was the last Harshaw to live at Ed Harshaw's house on Lincoln Avenue. And when Jane moved from that house, this is where she moved. We sold that for Jane to a minister who came here to retire, can't remember his name. And as I said, my cousin Jill's son and his family now live there. Beautiful hydrangeas.
Yes.
Another Lincoln Land Company house. This was Harmon's for a long time. The Harmons lived over on Butler Street, and they bought this house, moved it over there, and they built that whole addition on the right side of that house. As you can see, it's almost as big as the house was. This is Ethel and Ed Hummel's house, and it was pretty much the talk of the town. It's a very Western style house, both inside and out. And Ed and Ethel built it in 1952. They owned acreage there. Ed was in the coal business for years and years. But a really lovely house, very difficult to heat, no basement, and radiant heat in the floors. It was expensive to maintain.
Did they have horses?
Yes, they did. Yeah, Judy Hummel was their only child, and Judy rode horses. My niece Susan, my brother Jack's daughter, and Judy were friends. She used to spend time there. She thought it was a mansion. Okay, this house was built by Wayne and Esther Bashwood. This is a Holmes Crosby design house, built in 1948. Is pretty much now the way it was when it was built. Don't know who lives there. Oh, that's right. That's right. It was someone before that. Can't remember who that was.
Oh, Hugh, W. Hugh.
Yeah, we had, when they did Hummel Boulevard, we had to get a right-of-way, maybe you remember this trip, I don't know whether you do or not, but we had to get a right-of-way to this right or to the left of this property in order to get utilities back to Hummel Boulevard. Okay, this is Mary and Glenn Cruther's house. They moved from the funeral home, actually from the John Cruther's house on Pine Street, which got purchased for a funeral home. They moved to the William Harshaw house on Bessemer Avenue, which got turned into a funeral home. When she commissioned Holmes Crosby to design this house, she said, under no circumstances am I going to build a house that can be turned into a funeral home. This was 1938. Beautiful house. Eddie Esposito's daughter lives there now.
Jerry and Richard.
Yeah, I sold that to Harry, or to Eddie Esposito. Shortly after I was in business, must have been 72 or 73, somewhere in that time frame. And a little bit of Grove City, which everyone here has to know. This town is very prejudiced against Italians. You know, just purely and simply, it was. One of the Cruthers was trying to sell the house, and of course she was convinced that everyone in town would be dying to buy Mother's house. Well, they weren't. Okay. And so Eddie, I'm looking for a house for he and Madeline. And when I listed this, when Cruthers finally gave up and I listed it, I called Eddie immediately and he said, Chuck, he said, we looked at that house. Madeline wants nothing to do with it, there's too much to do. I said, you get a hold of Madeline and come and look at this house again. $50,000 is what the price was. So Eddie came, and when we walked in the door, my first job here was interior decorating. I had a decorating shop on Broad Street 50 years ago this year, as a matter of fact. I opened. But anyway, I told you I'm old. Anyway, we walked in the house. They met me up there. And as we opened the door, he said, now listen to him. He's not just a realtor. He's going to tell you what you can do with this house. And they bought it. It proved that the combination worked very well. Beautiful, beautiful house, beautiful property. It was, that property actually originally was part of the Black Brothers property. Okay, now this is Mr. and Mrs. McBride's house, built around 65, wasn't it, Chuck?
Yeah, we moved in 65.
Okay, that's very good. I taught Tripp how to swim to Grove City Country. Anyway, I show this because it is such a good example of the cross-section of styles of houses we have out there. You know, it was shocking to some people. I think Bob Brooks designed it, didn't he?
Designed it? What
think he
name
was
did you
the
say?
Bob Brooks from Sharon?
I think that's correct.
I think it was.
Book Davis built.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And Book Davis, you know, they never in business a long time and they built everything. But anyway, I show it because, and it has a new owner now as of last year, Doug Yard. Or not? Doug. That's right, Doug's daughter.
Her name's Miller.
Yeah. And I show this belongs to Eddie Esposito Jr. Okay, it is the last house built in the boulevard, and that's the reason for showing it. Next.
I didn't have a question.
All right, this, sadly, you can hardly see, there were flowering crabs that surrounded this house. This house was built by Craig Shira in 1949. It was also designed by Holmes Crosby. And he and Hazel Shira had no children. It's a two-bedroom house on a beautiful lot. The Ed Harshaw house would be next to it on the left. No, the Clifford Harshaw house, the Prairie house is next to it, then the Ed Harshaw house. But this would have been one of the larger lots in the original boulevard. There we go. This is the Charlie Burton house. A man named Charlie Burton built the house in 1930. He was married to the sister of Dr. Kelly, and I wish I could remember the name. Their father was a doctor who lived down on Pine Street. But this is an absolutely aesthetically beautiful, architecturally beautiful house. It really is. Charlie was a salesman. I don't even know who he sold for. He was on the road a lot. And when he sold the house, when he passed away, it was sold to Kai Wary and her husband, John, who would be Judge Waring's parents. And they lived there. I forget who bought it from them. We sold it, but
I think you're the third owner.
The Maulers,
Jackie Muller.
yes. Yeah.
and then it's like Ola's house.
And then,
Same circle.
this is all.
That's it.
There's one more house that was built on the boulevard.
What's that?
Oh, that's right.
It was my brother's house.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the last one.
Yeah, but that wasn't the last one. It was built before this one.
No, it's the
Oh,
last
really?
one.
Oh, okay.
Recently.
No,
Yeah.
within the
No, I
last
thought this was
4 or 5 years ago. They met 5 years ago.
And then their plans for next year.
But it was not too old now, so maybe 7 years ago.
Okay, just a quick guessing game. Anybody recognize this house? Very similar to H.L.R. Anderson's house on the circle. This house belonged to Ray McKay. McKay Carriage Works. It was on the corner of Center and West Main Street, across the street from Mrs. Harshaw's house. Torn down many years ago. You've seen this. This is the Isle of Fithian's house, the way it should look.
Don't let your feelings show.
Tell me what you really think, right? I've been told that.
I just kind of remember going out on the street.
This is entry, it's Hillcrest Circle. It's one of the, I mentioned Hillcrest Circle too, because frequently people would come into town and they thought they had a living boulevard. And I fought that to a great extent. And I would tell people, the boulevard is aesthetically the prettiest neighborhood in town. There's no question about it. You know, you can't argue with that. But there are other neighborhoods that are equally nice. And the Hillcrest Circle is aesthetically appealing as well. This house was Ellis Bryant Kettler's home. Her mother moved here. You sort of check the date, can't tell you, but the house wasn't very old. It was built in the mid-20s. And Ellis's mother moved here with, I believe it was 4 children. She was a young widow and had 4 children. And she moved here in order to be where all those kids could be educated. And that's the only way she could afford to do it. Alice and George were living here when they were mandated to move to the big house. Okay, Weir was getting married to Edna Johnstone. They were moving to her house. And George's sister, who was married to Heath Larry from U.S. Steel Company at the time, George's sister really talked them in to moving into the house. We sold this house at that time for $28,000. But Ellis has been the caretaker of that house. No, could have done a better job. Any questions?
Do you know anything about a golf course
Yes.
that was like, I believe, between Pine and Lincoln, or Pine
Yes.
and Terrace?
Yes, that, and I don't know who owned the golf course, but the house, the lot where Ed Harshaw's house is, was supposedly the #1 tee. And it went over, onto Terrace Avenue, and that whole area was farmed. And, I'm sure it wasn't a very well-groomed golf course that we know today, but, and I think it was 6 holes.
I was gonna say, I heard that it wasn't the full 9 holes. I
No,
was gonna
I think
say
it was
5
6
or
holes.
6.
I didn't know that.
Any other questions?
Chuck, did you have fun selling houses in Grove City?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. When I sold, another story, when we sold Marion McConkey's house, it was kind of sad, really, because she and Kip were cousins, second cousins. And she came to Kip, and she said, Kip, I can't stay in the house anymore. Had a coal furnace, roof was leaking. It just had gotten beyond her. Marion, basically, she graduated from college with my Aunt Ruth in 1932. And she had a college education. She lived with her brother Craig, who was legally blind, at a little music shop on College Avenue. They lived in genteel poverty, literally. And anyway, it came time for her to sell the house. And Kip said, okay, fine. He said, I understand. He said, I'll have Chuck stop down and discuss the price. We had it so locked down. We came up with the price of $12,000. House needed redone. The original kitchen, coal furnace, leaky roof, Anyway, they listed $12,000, and I said, now remember, Marion was a descendant of the Cunninghams. The 3rd floor of the house was full of things from the Cunningham family. And of course, the McConkey family, another old family. What are you going to do, Marion, with all the things in the house? She said, I'm going to give it all away. I said, Marion, I said, you can't afford to do that. She said, I can't have a sale. I cannot think of having a sale. Have people come through my house? And I said, well, how about this? How about if you go down and visit Gary Smith? Gary was her adopted kid who lived 2 doors down, I think it was, the States lived. And he said, take the bus, go down and see Gary, and I'll arrange an auction. And that's what we did. I was given the name of an auctioneer over in Ohio, who I was told had a huge following. His name was Dave Black. And I called him. He came over and went through the house and said, this is going to be one sale. Well, it was. $12,000 for the house. And I delivered cash and checks to Marion, who was now working at the library. Before the library, she worked in the kitchen at Grove City College with her college education.